In my teaching career, education has changed. People like Michael Gove will tell you that schools have improved thanks to his intervention, because he was about improving schools that would be better by improvement. Now, the measure of improvement is interesting because schools are measured on exam results, and that's it. And the subtleties of education, such as they were, have been lost. So if kids can't pass exams, they're no good. This is all very well, and schools have improved because teachers have got better at passing exams. Kids have got better at passing exams. The thing about exams is they're not really a test of understanding, for the very simple reason. If you teach somebody something, and if you teach to a question, if you start with the question and then teach them how to answer it, you're teaching a process. If in the exam they are asked the same or similar question, you are examining the process, not understanding. In order to test understanding, you actually have to ask a different question that relies upon them using the same understanding but in a different way. And therefore you can somehow assess their level of understanding. In our world of lawyers and suing people and so on, examiners daren't ask questions that are outside the box because they will get absolutely slaughtered in the press, possibly in the court. So they ask fairly standard questions that have appeared before. So they're not trying to catch out the students, which is fair enough. But what it means is that what we're testing is process, not understanding. And so teachers are teaching process, kids are learning process. The OECD, a leading world authority on education and so on, said about 10 years ago now that by the 2020s Britain would have the best qualified and worst educated workforce in the industrialised world. And what they were referring to was the rise of process. Now you may say process is fine, and perhaps it is. What it doesn't do is allow people the possibility of thinking outside of the box. It negates initiative, difference. It actually works against entrepreneurial spirit because that doesn't help you in an exam where you're being tested on process, which is just repetition of the same thing. So process is a very useful tool in creating a populace who don't think for themselves. It's also the means by which you control people, because if they won't step out of the process, they do exactly as they're told, they just get on with it without thinking about it. People doing process are cheaper because initiative costs money. Initiative requires training, initiative requires taking responsibility. All of these things people expect to be rewarded for. If they're just doing process, it's cheaper. And they don't think for themselves. People who don't think for themselves are very gullible in terms of avoiding very simple messages. We're in the process of taking back control, which will lead to a strong and stable government. The theory is that if you tell people small lies, they will spot them because they understand small lies. They use them in their everyday lives and they can see them. If you tell them a big lie, they're more inclined to believe you because it will be so outside their experience of normal life, they won't quite pick it. If you repeat it strongly, you reinforce the lie and they are more likely to believe it. it was Adolf Hitler who accused the Jews of doing this in his book Mein Kampf, which is ironic. Joseph Goebbels, his mate, said in 1941 that the English government relies on, not on intelligence, but on thick-headedness, and that if they lie, which they do, they tell big lies, and the important thing is to keep repeating the big lie, even if they look ridiculous in doing so. In recent times, we've had the phenomenon of fake news. Oh, that's fake news. Or lies, in fact. And politicians have got on the bandwagon of fake news and used it to their own advantage. There's also been this notion of misremembering. I misremembered. AKA, you lied. When politicians are accused of lying, and when the proof is close at hand, we have seen them firing the people getting a bit too close. Perhaps more pernicious than the big lie is the big rhetoric. Something that is meaningless but gets repeated over and over again. Strong and stable government is meaningless. Doesn't mean anything. And yet, repeated over and over again, becomes part of common currency and common culture. And we will vote for it. A number of years ago, my first wife Petra and I had a friend in Prague who was bubbly and funny and a little bit mad, but great fun. And she had a friend who was the opposite of this, who was bland and didn't seem to go with our other friend who was wild and wacky and interesting. And she was very dull, this other person. She was nice, but just a bit boring. My wife and I referred to her as personality. Not to her face. I'm a terrible person. Anyway, the point is, personality is very important. And what you find is that people buy into personality as being a mark of other things. So having a lot of personality makes people feel comfortable with you. And if you can project that, they feel as though they know you. For example, people on our television screens, our nation's favourites. You know, I don't know, Dame Vera Lynn. She's lovely, isn't she? I don't know, I've never met her, but I think she is, because I've seen her on the TV screen, so I buy into her personality. You know, similarly, Jeremy Corbyn is lovely, a bit ineffectual, a bit pathetic, but he's got a projection of personality, partly through the press. Theresa May is strong and stable, and when she talks to those Europeans, she's going to be a bloody difficult woman, which I can well believe. And we buy into personality. Now, it's funny that all the other leaders in the world who have really sold themselves on the cult of personality are people like Adolf Hitler, Chairman Mao, Joseph Stalin, and so on. People who have been, by popular consent, not very nice people, who rely on the cult of personality to project themselves into people's homes, to buy loyalty, obedience, and so on. And this allows them an enormous amount of power, which the three examples have abused terribly, which have resulted in the death of millions of people. I'm not saying Theresa May is going to kill millions of people. Or Jeremy Corbyn. The danger here is that we believe in personality and we don't talk about the issues. So it's all about him and her in our election. It's Corbyn versus May. It's the jam-making beardy weirdy in the sandals against the strong, bloody difficult diplomat who's going to forge ahead. Well, that's a no-brainer. We go for the strong woman, not the wimpy man. What Labour are doing is trying to make it about life and things that we do and what will happen to our country after the election. They're trying to portray a socialist utopia to gain your vote. The Tories are ignoring anything in terms of policy that they could be nailed for or held to account for after the election, because they want a free hand. And when they get a massive majority, why wouldn't they? And in effect, we're voting for her personality, not for her policies, because her policies will be whatever she thinks they will be at the time when she makes them. And she will be able to do that because she'll have a vast majority. Hitler used this. He called it the Führerprinzip, the leadership principle. And that was that because he was such a big personality and such a wonderful person, whatever he thought, his will, was what was right for Germany. It was a sort of yellow, red and black leadership principle. That's the leadership principle that's right for Germany. And that's what we'll have under Theresa May.